You know, some people have said that I'm the fastest gun in the West. That's not true. I'm being very dishonest. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Welcome to Thumb Together TV, folks. My name is Andrew Fantasia. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like and give some love to that subscribe button so I can keep making more. Today we're talking about Westworld Season 2, Episode 2, Reunion. And of course, it goes without saying that this is going to be a spoiler-full episode. So please don't send me angry bomb letters if I say something that you didn't know already. You have been warned. Now, Reunion I found to be, first of all, a much more fast-paced episode than last week's season premiere. Last week focused primarily on Bernard. This week focuses on Dolores. Of the two, right now, Dolores is going through the most interesting shit. I mean, she is tearing through the countryside. She's a woman on a mission, and she's got a mission. She's not just killing willy-nilly. She's got something she's looking for in particular, but don't want to jump ahead too much. Let's talk about the beginning of this episode. Let's talk about the real world, because we saw it. We finally saw what the real world looks like outside the park, and it's pretty nice. It's not crazy dystopia or anything like that. It's not even really Blade Runner-y. You know, there's no flying cars or anything like that, but it's just a sprawling metropolis of light and color. A lot of people ride around on bicycles. I have a feeling there's some kind of emissions thing going on, maybe, because I don't remember seeing too many cars. I saw mostly bikes. Throughout this episode, we see flashbacks of Dolores' life, and they all take place long before the present day. The first one we see is her in what looks like a hotel room with Arnold, and Arnold is showing her the real world, and he's like, oh, look out there, it's nice, there's buildings and such, and Dolores is, of course, blown away. She's like, wow, look at all the pretty lights. He takes her on like a little tour of not the city, but just, he takes her across the street and he shows her like, oh, this is the house that they're building for my family. He says something along the lines of, now my family will be close to me when I work in the park. Now, they showed the skyline of this city a couple of times, but maybe I just missed it because I was too excited to see like buildings on Westworld, but I could not tell where this was set. I couldn't see any defining, landmarks, anything like that. So I don't know if this is supposed to be a real world city or if it's just, a random place. That is one question that's kind of been always, on the back burner of my mind throughout the whole series, and this just kind of brought it to the forefront is, exactly where in the world is the park? Is it in America? Is it in Europe, Asia? Like where is the park situated? Where's this city that Arnold is showing to Dolores? It's just a little interesting thing that I don't think it matters. I'm willing to bet it does not matter. But it's just something, that kind of went through my mind. And I'm like, I wonder. We all assume it's somewhere in the American desert, hence Westworld. But that could be all fabricated too. Who knows? So Dolores is having these flashbacks. And we keep coming back to the present. And she is with Teddy and with Angela. And where we left off last episode, Angela told them, we found this, come see. And Dolores told Teddy, I have to show you something. And we speculated last week, what's she talking about? What's she going to show him? And this week we find out what she's showing him. Angela found an elevator, an entrance down into the sublevels of the park. So what Dolores was showing Teddy was, she was just pulling back the curtain. She's showing him, this is a park. This is what these people are doing to us. She takes him into this little maintenance room. There's a security guy in there, and they stuff his face in like the molten skin, the synth skin, that white goop, and it like burns him, and I'm like, oh, that's not pretty. But she gets this guy's tablet, and she brings up Teddy on the tablet, and she shows him pictures of all his deaths, and basically kind of breaks his brain a little bit, and he's like, what's going on? Poor Teddy. I mean, he's such a sweet man. He's such an innocent dude in all of this, and when you see him come to terms with this, and look down at those pictures and be like, whoa, and his world is shattered, you can't help but feel a little bit sorry for the guy. He has been one of the few mainstays of innocence throughout all this, and last night in Reunion we saw the death of Teddy's innocence, and it was a sad thing. It was like showing a little kid, hey, Santa Claus isn't real, neither is the Easter Bunny, neither is the Wiggles. It's all fake. But the flashbacks don't stop there. We get a few more. Now, the earliest flashback we got, chronologically speaking, was very, very cool. We saw young William and Logan together again, sitting on a couch in a skyscraper somewhere, because it's the future and everything's a skyscraper. And judging from what they're saying, judging from the way they're speaking, we can tell that this takes place before Logan took William to the park. And they're sitting there and they're having a business discussion with somebody. And then that person leaves and William is bored and he walks away and he leaves. And Logan is sitting by himself when he's approached by two people, one of whom is a man that we've not seen before, and the other one is Angela. And when I saw Angela, I was like, whoa, this is getting real really quickly. Angela and this other man are there, in essence, to sell the idea of the park to Logan, because, as it turns out, they address Logan as Mr. Delos. So now we know, it's confirmed, baby, confirmed 100%. Logan is part of the Delos family. That's his family. That's them. So this man and Angela have approached Logan as a potential investor. And we've heard kind of rumblings of this before, that, you know, the park was not going to survive unless it had financial backing. And that's where Delos came in. Logan gets taken to a room full of people, and this man and Angela tell him, you know, see if you can find which of the people are not real. As it turns out, none of them are. They're all hosts. And that blows Logan's mind in so many different ways. Looking at it from a business standpoint, what a perfect sales pitch. I don't know if that was Robert Ford's idea or Arnold or whoever had that thought. How do we sell the park to this potential investor? We don't do it. We let the hosts do it, because that's what's going to sell. So they literally just send two hosts out into the world to this investor and be like, here, come into this room full of more hosts. See if you can guess which of us is real. Oh, trick question. None of us are. We're all robots. Oh, that scene was just mind-blowing. Like, I want to watch it again right now. All the work that had to be put into that from Ford and Arnold's perspective. I can just picture them just sitting in a hotel room, like, nearby, like, swirling like a glass of cognac, just waiting for Logan Delos to come running up to their hotel room with like a big smile on his face and be like, I'm in, here's money. That's such a cool, badass way to promote, to get backing for your park. Like, well done. What's interesting about this flashback, though, is that it's the only flashback in the whole episode that does not involve Dolores. But I have a feeling there's a theory floating around, and I think it might be true, and if it is, then this flashback did involve Dolores. I'll get there later. So through more flashbacks, we see William coming into the fold at Delos, and we actually meet Mr. Delos. We meet Logan's father, the man who started this company in the first place. And he sounds a lot like Scrooge McDuck, and he's a billionaire, so it's kind of funny. And we see William, after his experience in the park, still young, but we see him selling this idea to Mr. Delos, because the whole idea of the excursion was for Logan to get William on his side as another backer. And that's where we get the big reveal of this episode. You know, way back in the day, episode 1, they made it perfectly clear that the park, it's one thing to the guests, it's one thing to the folks working in the park there, and it's another thing entirely to management. And what we find out in this episode is exactly what it is to management, and it is pretty damn scary considering what's going on in the real world today. They're data mining. They're collecting information on the guests. The guests are all being observed 24/7. It makes perfect sense. You need to be wealthy to go to Westworld. It costs, I think, 10 grand a day or something like that. 40 grand a day. They mentioned last season how much it costs, but it ain't cheap. Going to Westworld, you got to have some of this if you want to be a guest. So it stands to reason that the people who frequent the park are, financially speaking, very powerful people, very influential people. And the park is, at the end of the day, one big Rorschach test. It shows you your true self. It did exactly that with William. It showed William his true self. So William's selling point to Mr. Delos was essentially, it is a method, a very expensive, elaborate method with which to collect ammunition for potential blackmail. At least that's what I'm gathering from it. So, you know, a rich and powerful person, whether it's a business person or a politician, a philanthropist, what have you, they go to the park, they do some fucked up things in this park. Delos can then turn around and say, you know, I would really like it if your company did this for my company, and then you can say no if you want, but just in case, you know, just to let you know, we have this footage of you beating up a prostitute in our park. So are you sure you want to say no? And that is freaking insane, man. If that is what Delos is doing, and it looks like that's what is happening here, the potential for just like the corporate and political espionage that Delos could pull is outstanding. We don't know yet. We've seen the real world now, but we don't exactly know the state of the real world. Logan makes some cryptic remarks about it. The world is burning, and they're the ones who lit the match. He says something along that line. But we don't know if things are okay now. If this is the kind of world where corporations rule, Delos could be at the top of the food chain, and if they're not, then they could potentially be collecting this data in order to become so. Delos wants Abernathy as an insurance policy. Now I'm even more intrigued as to like what this might... Maybe Abernathy has recordings in his CPU of somebody. Does Delos want Abernathy so they can blackmail somebody? If you look at every host as essentially a walking, talking smartphone, then they have all of this information just ready to be used at a moment's notice. And that blows my mind. The remainder of the episode follows, like I said, either Dolores and her group or Old William, and it turns out both of them are looking for an army. Old William actually teams back up with Lawrence. We get to see Lawrence again. Everybody loves Lawrence. And Dolores goes looking for the Confederados, and they're both recruiting armies. Now, Dolores is very successful in this, but William is not. We get a great scene where he walks into Lawrence's old village, and there's a new El Lazo. And if you remember from last season, back in the day when William was a young man, Lawrence was El Lazo. There's another host filling that position, and it's Giancarlo Esposito. He's on the show now. Granted, I don't know if he's going to be a mainstay because he dies, but he's the new El Lazo, and when William comes to recruit him and his banditos they're basically like, no, we're not having that. Robert Ford's programming comes out, and he speaks directly to William, and he's like, William, this game to find the door, it's your game, but you have to do it on your own. And then Giancarlo Esposito shoots himself, and all of his men do the same. And it's just another beautiful example of just how powerful Robert Ford is, and how even though he's dead, his programming is still everywhere, and he's still essentially like God. His fail-safes and his backups are all inside every one of these hosts. One person who has very little screen time in this episode is this person right here, my girl Maeve. Maeve has one scene in this episode, but it's a very important scene. It's safe to say that on this show, Maeve, Dolores, and Bernard are the three main characters. Throughout season 1, Maeve and Dolores share a grand total of one scene together. One scene. And then for the rest of it, they're just doing their own thing. Now, at this point in the story, both Maeve and Dolores are woke, essentially. They know what's going on, and they're not having it. And they're both on a crusade to rectify the problem that is Westworld. And in this episode, they meet up, and there's a little bit of a standoff, and there's some tension there. They recognize each other, and they remember each other, but, they didn't really interact, so there's no love lost between them. Dolores is much more openly hostile than Maeve is. Maeve is like, let me pass in peace, I'm doing my own thing. Whereas Dolores looks like, she doesn't really want to let her pass in peace, but she does. I think that meeting is very important because, like I said, these are essentially our two main characters on the show, and they have so infrequently been in the same room together that speaks volumes unto itself. I have a feeling that their relationship, their interaction, whether it be as allies or as enemies, is going to be insanely important further down the road. So I'm really curious to see how are these two women going to interact with each other in the future. The episode ends with one final flashback where young William shows Dolores this mesa where something is being built. Then in the present day, we see Dolores showing the same thing to Teddy, except it's a finished structure. And she tells him, she says, there's a weapon there, and I'm going to use it to burn this world to the ground. Now that, of course, raises the big question, what is this weapon? Is it, in fact, the data that has been collected? Is it all of this stored visual knowledge of all these wrongdoings made by all these very powerful humans, and Dolores is going to use it to metaphorically burn the world to the ground? She has seen the real world, and she's talked about how splendorous it is. Have you ever seen such splendor? That line keeps coming up. So I think it's very fitting if the episode begins with Dolores in awe of the real world and ends with her ready to destroy it from the inside out with all this knowledge that Delos has collected. Now, I don't want this episode to run on too long, but I do want to touch on this theory that I heard. There's a theory that's been floating around on Reddit, and it makes a lot of sense, and I'm really buying into it right now. The theory is, in the last episode, when we saw two timelines, we saw sort of picking up where we left off before with the party and everybody getting shot. And then the second timeline, which took place a few weeks in the future, with Bernard waking up on the beach beach, all those hosts were dead in the water and Teddy was in the water and everything and all that. The theory speculates that when we see Bernard wake up on the beach, that's Bernard's body. That is a Bernard host body, but it's not actually Bernard in there. It's Teddy. In that episode, for the first time, we see hosts get their brains open and have CPUs removed, and all the data that is them is in that CPU. So this theory posits that at some point in time, Teddy's CPU is going to be pulled out of his head and put into a Bernard shell to do whatever. I'm assuming it's something Dolores wants him to do. So when we see Teddy's body floating in that lake, it's not actually Teddy in there, it's just his body, his shell. And you'll notice in that episode when Bernard is on the beach, he keeps looking at his hand as if, Teddy's a white guy, Bernard is a black guy. So if you're a white guy and you wake up in a body that's a black body, you're going to be like looking at yourself a lot. So that's what this theory has sort of brought to the table, that in this, jump 3 weeks into the future, somehow Teddy's mind is put into the body of this Bernard shell. And we saw a couple flashes during that episode too of multiple Bernard shells. This is making a lot of sense. Right now, I buy it. And going back to that flashback that I mentioned, all these flashbacks are coming from Dolores, except this one. This one is strictly about Logan being sold on the idea of Westworld in this room, and Dolores is not present in this room. We see another flashback where Dolores is playing piano, but in this particular flashback, she's not there. It's Clementine who's playing piano, and it's Angela who is the sexy robot who's selling the idea to this horny guy. So my theory on that is that we're seeing the same thing happen there. Dolores' CPU was in that room with Logan. Her body just wasn't. I think that CPU was either in Angela or, more likely, in Clementine, because Clementine is playing the piano, and we saw Dolores play piano later. Now, why they would do that, I don't know. Maybe Arnold was too fond of the shell and he didn't want to put it in jeopardy and whatever. I don't know. But that makes a lot of sense to me, because otherwise, how could that be a Dolores flashback? So I think that her CPU was in the shell of Clementine. She's playing away on the piano, and she's like, yo, what's up? I'm playing piano. And that's how she could hear everything. Because remember, when they're paused, when they're frozen, she can still retain those memories, those recordings. That's how she remembers Mr. Delos and William coming back to the park and all that. I'm willing to put money down. Dolores's processor is inside Clementine's body in that scene. Take that to the bank, kids. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I think that makes a lot of sense. So that was Reunion. That was Season 2, Episode 2 of Westworld. Things are just, there's so much here to mine. There's so much to mine. And we haven't even seen Shogun World yet. And we know it's coming because those trailers kept smacking us in the face with Shogun World, so that's coming too. So we got 8 episodes left of this season. I can't wait. I'll see you here next week. Until then, these violent delights have violent ends.